So, where are we in the movement of Matthew? Towards the end. Yeah, towards the end of his ministry. What did we talk about last week? You can just read the headers probably, chapter 24. I'm just making you all talk early because I'm probably going to start going, and then we have to establish that we're going to have a class with engagement early on so that when I start ranting, it won't hopefully kill too much. That's right. So we've had Jesus has done his ministry. He's come into Jerusalem, the triumphal entry. The time has come. And specifically what we just saw, he goes to the temple, he chastises the Pharisees, and then they leave. And the disciples say, look at the temple, isn't it great? As if to say, the time has come for you to fill the temple, for God to fill the temple with his glory once again. Like the moment is here, right? They recognize the significance of what's happening, just not quite how it's going to happen, right? And so he says, you've misunderstood. You know, that temple is not where God's going to dwell. That temple is going to be destroyed. And in fact, Jerusalem's going to be destroyed. And in fact, a lot of bad things are going to happen because of what's going to happen. And so he's establishing these kind of future events so that when they happen, they're not too discouraged. But keep in mind, specifically, this is after he's left the temple, and these are the disciples. So this is the crowd that's been with him. So Luke does a pretty good job of outlining that it's more than the apostles that have been with him. Matthew doesn't quite articulate who the group is, but it seems like there would have been several women like Mary Magdalene or Joanna or some of these women, but there's also the apostles and then some other people. So there's like a group of disciples that's been with him. And so it says disciples there, point this to him. We don't know exactly who that group is, but it seems to be a larger group. And he gives them this outline of chapter 24 of the destruction that's going to happen. Well, there's no actual break in his speech here from chapter 24 to 25. The parables he tells are part of this same sort of dialogue that he's giving. So this is all part of that same kind of context. There's no break as far as the text is written to show us that. He jumps straight into this parable. But I think it's interesting to highlight, and somebody made a comment Wednesday, I think I was talking to Rick, he talked about the compassion of Jesus we've seen throughout the whole gospel, and it's been pretty impressive. And so it's fascinating to see the shift that's taken place. He's gone from comforting and consoling and healing and providing food and casting out demons and doing all these things to the people. Now he's in Jerusalem, the time has come, and he is addressing the particular problems. He has chastised the Pharisees, he's called for the destruction of the temple and all those things. Like the time has shifted, and I think the way that he is speaking should help indicate what's happening, the change that's occurring. That he is much more direct and vehement and stark in the way that he's speaking now. And it's a lot more challenging in that regard too. And so all that occurs, we get to chapter 25, and he gives this parable. The kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were wise. For when the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, they all became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was this cry, "Here's the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all those virgins rose and trimmed their lamps, and the foolish said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." But the wise answered, saying, "Since there will not be enough for us and for you, go rather to the dealers and buy for yourselves." And while they were going to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door was shut. Afterward, the other virgins came also, saying, "Lord, Lord, open to us." But he answered, "Truly I say to you, I do not know you. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour." So this fits pretty closely with what he's just been talking about, right? This destruction, no one knows the day and the hour, almost foreshadowing the second coming, right? Like we don't know. A couple things about the parable itself that I think are valuable. I'm not an expert on first century Jewish culture or anything like that, but my general understanding is that these sort of marriage feasts are a big event, probably a big event for the whole town, and there would have been some sort of processional probably at night, and so the bridegroom goes through the town and stops and sees people along the way, and so the idea is that the last stop is where the bridesmaids would be, and they're waiting for him to come, and so he gets delayed, right? You're stopping and talking to people along the way. Something happens, you get delayed. So he shows up later than they expected. Something like that seems to be the implication. But what's the actual lesson here? Outside of like kind of the cultural explanation of how this happens, I think we understand, what is he saying? Yeah, anticipation. So some will look at this and try and like allegorize the parable, right? Like, what does the oil represent? We have to make sure we have to have no oil. What does that represent? What is this? I think that's the wrong way to look at it. I don't think it's an allegory. I think it's just a general kind of principle, right? The bridegroom's coming. Who is Jesus, right? He's established that. Jesus is coming, and be prepared for when he comes. Because if you have to leave and go get ready when he's already there, it's too late. It's a fairly simple sort of lesson, but why is it so important of a lesson? I guess maybe that's here too, but yeah. Yeah. Right. Like it's about the process. It's about along the way. I mean, NBA basketball analogy for those of you who are so inclined. Shaquille O'Neal, pretty famous basketball player. Some call him the most dominant player ever, right? But he famously would not do any preparation during the offseason. He would go do whatever he wanted, show up for the season to start, and he would get into playing shape by playing as the season went along, right? And it worked out for him for a few years. Won a couple titles, pretty famous, dominant basketball player, but he was not as dominant as long as he could have been. He didn't work on his game the way that others may have. One of the most physically talented players of all time. But he didn't take the offseason seriously. And he's talked about it, the difference that occurs there. It's one of the reasons why he never got along with his teammate Kobe Bryant, because Kobe was the exact opposite. So Kobe would get frustrated when he'd show up when the season started, he wasn't ready. You can't do that. There's a cost. Shortened his career, shortened the length of his peak, affected his ability to perform, right? All those things matter, right? He didn't grow as a player and develop as he could have because he didn't put it. Sports analogy, right? Not quite the same thing, but the principles apply. Procrastination during the exam, during the course of a semester, procrastination in life. The moment will come in which there will be an accounting. And the question is, who are you? Not like what you're going to do when that happens, but who are you? Who have you developed yourself to be? And in fact, that's a big part of what these parables then continue to be about. Like, be a certain way. Yeah. 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 Just this idea of continuing to strive, right? Continuing to better yourself, continuing to do the things that you're supposed to do. I had a conversation with a preacher friend of mine maybe 10 years ago or something, talking about these men that we knew that were preachers and how impressive it was that they knew the Bible the way that they did. And they could, pull up these verses and do all these things. And it was so impressive. We're like, we want to be that way someday, right? And so then you try really hard. You read a bunch, you try to memorize stuff. We would call each other, and we were trying to memorize Matthew at the time, right? And it was like, we have to summarize each chapter, and we'd have these short little pithy summaries. We're going to memorize Matthew because we wanted to jumpstart that process. Well, you realize after a few months of work on that it doesn't happen overnight, right? It takes time to be able to learn one book of the Bible, much less the entire thing. And then there's wisdom and experience that comes along with that. It's a process. And we understand that when it comes to personal growth and when it comes to knowledge. And that's part of the preparation, I think, here. It isn't about one thing. It isn't about, oh, we just forgot the one thing. It's about anticipation and preparation along the way, which I think, David's analogy fits in with that pretty well. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. The bridegroom is on his way. Were you going to say something, Michael? Yeah. Yeah, and I think here, they didn't do any work, is the idea. They didn't do any preparation. They just showed up, and misunderstood. Was there a comment up here? Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's the ongoing journey kind of thing in preparation. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Want some way around it. So this next parable, verse 14, again, Jesus continuing this same kind of thing. It'll be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also who had the 2 talents came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here I have made 2 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also who had received the 1 talent came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master answered him, "You wicked and slothful servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I have scattered no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers. And on my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Pretty harsh, right? Gave you back what you gave me. Like, that seems reasonable, and yet he's thrown into the outer darkness where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. We look at this parable, and it's one of those things where the word talents, I think most of us know that that's a unit of money, currency. But it becomes this kind of interesting play on words for us, that it is a talent, right? Because it's the way that we apply that a lot of times, using our talents that God has given us to be productive, all those sorts of things. But before we get into all that and kind of the application to us, let's consider who Jesus is talking to, right? The disciples, and the context in which he's talking to them. These people that are hearing this, if they were thinking about what he said and looking around, and they were trying to figure out who's the 5-talent man, who's the 1-talent man that we know, right? And they're considering what Jesus has been saying over the last week and all these things. How do you think that they would understand this in that context? Who's the 1-talent man? Which is who? Who's Jesus been getting on to for their lack of productivity? Yeah. And so I do this because I think that this helps kind of illustrate maybe the point here. Because as much as it's about talent and using the things that God gave you, I think that there's a little bit more specific kind of understanding here. God had given the law of Moses to these people. He had given them the message. He had told them what they were supposed to do. And what did the Pharisees do with that message? They buried it. They didn't grow Judaism. They didn't grow Israel. They buried it for their own glory. They took the money and they kept it and held on to it. And they kind of assaulted the people around them for their own gain. I mean, I think that's kind of the way that we need to look at this, is that it isn't just about like, oh, God gave all of us these things and we need to use those things. I think that's part of it, right? But I think specifically, we need to think about the Pharisees and what they did wrong as a 1-talent man, and think about then how that applies to us. I mean, it's like a funny thing, maybe, I don't know. I've heard this passage and some of the other passages in the New Testament that talk about the different members of the body, right? And we all have our role. It seems like, although I can't cite an example, that a lot of times, and maybe this is just the way that I always thought about it growing up, that the application is like, well, some people are really good song leaders. And so they use their talent of song leading. Some people are really good at giving these beautiful prayers, and they give the prayers. And everything then revolves around specifically our assembly, right? And we try to apply those things that way. I think we understand this is broader than that, and it's broader and yet more specific into the idea of what is it that God has entrusted to us? Like, what is the money God gave us? It's the gospel message. It is the truth of who he is. It is the promise of salvation. That's what he's given us. And so to take that message, to take that money, so to speak, and to bury it in the sand and say, look, I still have it, God. It's like, well, you completely missed the point, right? You are to be the light of the world. You are to shine for others. You're supposed to grow the kingdom. You're supposed to be a part of what's being developed here. And so to think about it in terms of individual talents, of what I may have and what you may have, I think is at once a little bit too narrow and a little bit too broad. Because it's too narrow to think about your specific application, but it's also too broad because I think he's really just talking about the kingdom and the message of the kingdom. I mean, look, he's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem and the way that they've misunderstood and how because they've rejected the Messiah, Israel's going to be rejected, right? So the next phase is you have this message, you have the prophecies of Jesus, just like the Pharisees had them. and they didn't use them or understand them or weren't open-minded enough to understand the way that Jesus fulfilled them. So you make sure that you're not that way. And you take that and you spread that around with you as well. I think that's really what he's getting at. Feel free to disagree with me, but any comments, questions about that? Yeah.
There's definitely something that he's trying to illustrate. He's definitely acknowledging and making it very clear equity, quality, or distribution of whether actual wealth or skills, however you want to think of it, they will not be the same. There's going to be an inequality there. Otherwise, there would have been no point. He would have just said, I have 3 servants, they all got the same thing, 2 were productive. The fact that he's taken the time to set up this difference, and of course he responds to the 5 and the 2 the same way. Both of those 2 individuals had some level of productivity. They weren't the same. One was given a larger bit of capital to start with, and so he was able to generate more. But he responded identically to those 2. He said he described both as being given little, and they were, they were productive with what little they were given, so they were going to be given more. And had the one with a single talent had come back with 2, we would expect probably the exact same response for that third. It was specifically the behavior or the way he responded to having the one or whatever that ended up generating the response where he was criticized and cast out from the master. So, I think he's definitely he's pointing to something here of, look, there's inequality and you still need to be productive with whatever you have. And obviously the gospel, we all have that. So we have that as a minimum. I think it's very good to point that out.
The way I would say what you're saying is God meets people where they are, right? The expectation is commensurate with what they've been given. And so, and it's the same thing, right? Like, to whom much has been given, much is expected. But I think you can look at it as God meets you where you are. You may not be the most talented, prosperous individual who's ever lived. And so God doesn't expect you to be as productive maybe as somebody else would be. You have been given a debilitating illness or disease, or your life circumstances have fallen out around you, like whatever it is, right? Like, God meets you where you are, I think is a way to put that, which is to say you need to use what you have for the work within the kingdom. And right. Yeah. God meets you where you are. He expects you to be productive with what you have, however little or however much it is, in his service. And this treasure is the thing that you need to be productive with. Yeah. 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 Unwilling to do anything with what you have. Bury it in the sand, hide it. Which I think is part of the way that, connects back to the light of the world, right? City set on a hill can't be hidden. You don't cover your lamp, right? We sing this little light of mine. Like that whole imagery and idea, and here he is hiding it and burying it, as opposed to letting it shine and letting it grow and letting it flourish and all those things. Any other comments here, thoughts here? Yeah.
you're right. But to Mark's point, it's got to be if you want to do that. You've got to take advantage of that. And I think the preciousness of what he's talking about here would be difficult for them to get the right right.
Yeah, I think that's well said. This isn't an insignificant amount of money, whether it's 5, 3, or 1. I mean, there's all the different ways that people have calculated what this means in modern currency. I'm not particularly interested in that. It's just not an insignificant amount of money, right? It's a lot of money. Even 1 talent is a lot. And this idea then of the relative nature of it, the baseline's still a lot. And the idea is, what have you done with it, with what's been given to you? Yeah. 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 Yeah, foolish and lazy, are the kind of relative terms he uses there for each group. But in either case, they have not prepared the way that they need to. One comes across maybe as more personal preparation. The other one comes in terms of like external preparation for the world around you and the way that you've influenced people. But either way, there's this work to be done, this preparation to be done as the Messiah comes, as he returns. And we need to anticipate that. And then he kind of continues, he says, verse 31, when the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him will be gathered all the nations, and he will separate people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep on his right, but the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will answer them, truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me. Then he will say to those on his left, depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. Then they also will answer, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and did not minister to you? Then he will answer them, saying, truly I say to you, as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. It's like you get these moments, right? When Jesus is teaching, he talks about forgiveness, he talks about love, he talks about mercy, he shows all this compassion, but you get these moments, and this is the third straight kind of parable that he's told. This one may be the most stark of, there will be a separation, and there will be the sheep, and there will be the goats, and there will be the saved, and there will be the punished. And that's just the reality. There's going to be a cost and a consequence here. Now, in the first case, they were foolish and didn't prepare. In the second case, they were lazy and weren't productive. And in this case, they didn't take care of the hungry and the sick and the poor. But there's a word there that I think is interesting, which kind of changes the way that we read this some. When he says, when they ask, when did we see you a stranger, welcome you, naked, clothe you, whatever, what does he say in verse 40? Yeah, the least of these, my brothers. And I think that's important and significant here, because I don't think that the point is to take away from the obligation we should have towards the poor and the sick in general, but there's a particular application he's making, right? He's talking about those that have ignored and mistreated those his brothers. those that are a part of the kingdom. Matthew 12, he kind of references this idea. And when he talks about the Son of Man coming in his glory, I think we can use 1 Corinthians 15 to argue that in some ways he is already seated. That this is an application not just at the end times, but even now. Those who are now taking care of those his brothers that are here and the way that they are treated. And that's significant, not in the point is not to take away any sort of cultural responsibility towards the sick and the poor. It's rather to hone in specifically on a lesson for them, which is to these people who are his brothers, presumably. These are the disciples. Remember, this isn't in the temple surrounded by the Pharisees. He's still talking to the disciples. And there's a lesson there for them. Not just that they need to be taking care of each other. I think that's part of it. But it's also a way of encouraging them, because what's going to happen to a lot of these disciples? How are they going to be treated over the next years of their life? Heavily persecuted. They're going to be hungry, and they're going to be poor, and they're going to be thrown in prison, and they're going to be mistreated. And there's this perspective that Jesus is providing as they go back and reflect on this, which is God sees and is in control, and he will delineate those that have taken care of my people and those that have not. He will see, and he will comfort, and he will protect those that are kind to them, and he will persecute and punish those that are persecuting and punishing. Why is that so important?
In the end, this just goes back to, he was asked earlier, what's the greatest commandment? He answered it very clearly. Love the Lord your God, and you have to love your neighbor as yourself. You're not doing this other stuff. You're not loving your neighbor as yourself. How we treat our fellow man is the best way to demonstrate that we also love God. It's easy to say I love God. There's nothing we have to, that God needs from us directly. We're the ones that depend. But the way we treat our fellow man says everything about whether or not we actually.
Yeah. And there's this justice problem that exists in the world, right? Justice is hard to define. We can look at laws and think that they are unjust, and look at the legal system and think that it's unfair and that it's not as just as it's supposed to be. Look at criminals getting away with things, and like innocent people being punished or whatever it is. Like, justice is a problem. And part of the problem is that once you get away from specifically Christianity and God's standard, everybody debates what justice is. Their personal feelings get involved, and there's disagreement about all that. But everybody on some level cries for justice, right? They want some sort of justice. Now, they may disagree on the standard of justice or what it is, but especially when something wrong is done to them, they want justice. And what God is saying is that in the final judgment, when the time is coming, and when God parses out the sheep and the goats, he will look and justice will be served. And that's important, isn't it? Because we need the moment for justice to pay out. Like, we need to know that the accounting is going to be reconciled, right? The books are going to be balanced, whatever it is, right? And not in like the accountant way where you kind of have fun making different books and accountants and stuff. I don't know anything about accounting. It just seems like they do funny things. Make it work how they want to. They have to balance, but I don't know. Anyway, but the idea of justice, right? Like the idea of God's justice, like we need that. We need to know that it's going to be made right. Because we can look at our lives and say, this isn't just. And we may be right. That justice was not served in this particular incident. That the wicked have prospered, or the innocent have suffered, or I've been mistreated, or this crime was committed against me and the person got away with it, right? And we feel those things and we understand them, but to know that justice will be served, and particularly in the case of the way that people treat Christians, the brothers of God, right? Like his brothers, Jesus' brothers. Like the idea that justice will be served in regards to that is important and significant. Because the New Testament promises time and time again that there will be persecution, there will be rejection, right? And when those things happen and those things occur, you may not see the swift hand of justice the way that you would like. But remember Jesus' analogy here, right? And notice that the problem isn't just that you have persecuted, it's that you haven't helped. That you haven't reached out and done the things that you need to do to help God's people. That they were hungry and they were poor and they were sick, and you walked by and ignored them. And of course, that becomes a bigger analogy for the general principle of persecution and all those things. But that's what he's getting at. The idea is to comfort these disciples here, to encourage them a little bit about who they're supposed to be. But I think this is a lesson of justice here. God's justice coming through and being true. Because the world is not a just place. But we can remember that God, as he sits on his throne and as he parses out the sheep from the goats, that justice will be served. And that's incredibly comforting to those that demand justice and incredibly terrifying to those who aren't just at all. Thoughts, comments? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right. And it's amazing the way that he does all this, right? The way that he outlines what it means to be a follower of his, the character that it has. We talked about love your neighbor as yourself, right? It's these little things that matter the most. Yeah, it's who you are, and that's part of the preparation thing, the talent thing, right? What are you doing with what's been given you? That's part of the preparation thing and having enough, like all these things fall in line to this sort of character of who you are, and when it comes down to it, in this example here, how you treat people. That's what matters, yeah. Yeah.
Everybody the same. You give them their ability. So we know we all don't have the same ability, but what ability we have, we better use it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Some of you may remember or have known Doc Warner, Guy Warner. He was my forensics coach when I was at Florida College, and I had him for speech. So I was on the debate team, and then I had him for intro to speech. And we had to give some speech on something. You had to give 5 speeches throughout the class, and that was the primary portion of your grade. And I went in and I gave some speech, and he gave me a C. And I was ticked off because I was like, I gave the best speech in the class. Pretty objectively, I was the most dynamic and interesting of anyone in here. So I went to him after class, and I was like, why did I get a C? I was like, I gave a great speech. It was awesome. And he looked at me and said, did you give A, effort? And I just left. Because he knew, right? He knew that I could have done better. It didn't matter how well other people did. Half the people in the class were terrified to stand in front of their classmates and say anything, right? So the bar is pretty low to being better than people who have never given a speech in their life and have no desire to ever do it again. So he looks at me and said, you could have done better, so you get a C. So then, now I have to work harder on the next one, right? As frustrating as that is. And that's the idea here, right? Like God meets you where you are with all of these things. He knows what you're capable of and what you can do. And so, unfortunately for me, I like public speaking, so I better be doing it, I guess, on some level, maybe. I don't know. You all can debate whether I'm any good at it or not. But, the whole thing is this idea of giving them what they have, right? Like, this is what you have. This is what I expect of you. It's just. It's fair. It's who God is. It's not unfair or unjust, and God's the only one that can do that, right? God's the only one that can peer into our hearts and see who we are and what we're trying and the effort we're giving, which is the incredibly frustrating thing about Christianity, right? Is that we have to give our all. You can't get away with cheating or manipulating because God sees your heart, You may be able to convince your speech teacher that you worked hard when you didn't, but you can't convince God of that, right? He knows what you're capable of. And so, that's all part of this justice thing too. It's an interesting point. Thanks, Dickey. Any other comments here before we get into chapter 26? So just a couple things here. So this kind of finishes all this. And in fact, he says when Jesus had finished all these sayings, he said to his disciples, so gives this big sermon. And then he says, you know that after 2 days the Passover is coming, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified. Well, they know who the Son of Man is. He's called himself that regularly. They know what he's saying. He just says this is going to happen. But, I mean, it's one of those things where somebody tells you and you just don't have a way of comprehending it, right? Like, you don't really know, like, there's got to be a trick. Like, this has to be another parable, right? Like, this has to be some other sort of thing. I mean, I can't imagine that if Jesus said that to me, I'd be like, oh, okay, like, I accept that in 2 days you will be crucified, right? Like, that the disparity between the Messiah and his ability to save people and perform miracles to the shame of the cross is so big that I don't know that any of us would have been like, oh yeah, I get it, right? But he tells them once again, this is going to happen. Meanwhile, verse 3, then the chief priests and the elders of the people gathered in the palace of the high priest, whose name was Caiaphas, and plotted together in order to arrest Jesus by stealth and kill him. But they said, not during the feast, lest there be an uproar among the people. I mean, at this point, they're like, we're going to kill him. Which is pretty incredible that you would get to a point where you just say, we're going to kill this man. We have to. We have to find a way to just get rid of him. We can't allow this to continue. This is causing too many problems. Which says a lot about their character, I think, that they would ever get to this point. But they see this interloper coming in and ruining what they have. Which, I mean, if you want to be as generous to them as possible, they believe that they are faithful. But, I mean, I don't know. Jesus called them whitewashed tombs full of dead men's bones, right? It makes you wonder how much they actually were convicted by what he said and lashed out as opposed to accepting it, you know. There's something kind of sinister about this that's hard to reconcile, but it's the nature of the gospel itself, and it's why Christians are persecuted, and it's why the gospel is treated the way it is by some people, because it is convicting that there is right and wrong, right? That there is a problem here that has to be solved. And so you have a couple options. You allow your heart to be pricked and you change who you are, or you reject it and you vehemently lash out against all those who are speaking such things. Or I guess the middle ground is you just say, I don't know, and just ignore it all. Yeah. Yeah. Right. So then, verse 6. Now when Jesus was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, which again, I mean, who's Jesus hanging out with? Simon the leper, right? I don't know. Just a nice little detail included there. A woman came up to him with an alabaster flask of very expensive ointment, and she poured it on his head as he reclined at table. And when the disciples saw it, they were indignant, saying, why this waste? For this could have been sold for a large sum and given to the poor. But Jesus, aware of this, said to them, why do you trouble the woman? For she has done a beautiful thing to me. For you always have the poor with you, but you will not always have me. And pouring this ointment on my body, she has done it to prepare me for burial. Truly I say to you, wherever this gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. Let's kind of take this story and butt it up against the parable he told of the sheep and the goats. You know, when have we seen you poor and hungry and all these things, right? And they're like, when you've done the least of these, my brothers. Well, here is Jesus. And when have you seen Jesus poor and hungry? Right now, right? Like he just told them in 2 days, I'm going to be delivered over to them and I'm going to be crucified. You see him in the garden praying, right? Sweats his drops of blood. And here he is reclining at table, and this woman recognizes something and anoints him and provides this service, this comfort, this elevation, this recognition of who he is. And like, we need to give to the poor. And Jesus says, no, what she's done is a noble thing, and she'll be spoken of. She saw something that they didn't. Whether or not she accepted the crucifixion and intended it to be a burial anointment or whatever, we don't know. But she saw something in Jesus and wanted to provide a service that everybody else in the room didn't recognize or understand. And Jesus honors her for that. Saw what she did and appreciated it. And I think that's a beautiful message. And he says it's a beautiful thing that she did that. And it allows us to maybe pause for a second and consider, who's the person that needs the service done. You may not think that they do. You may think they have it all together, that they've got it all figured out because they are this way or that way. But who is the one that we need to pay attention to that needs that kind of comfort and service? I think that's part of the lesson there maybe. But at the very least, honor the woman who anointed Jesus, because she had the Messiah in her presence and did a beautiful thing for him. And so I think that's a lovely thing to consider, specifically her for. In a moment of this kind of like terror and dread and anxiety, here's one person who did something for Jesus. John 10, or Johnny washes the disciples' feet, all that stuff. But like here, she washes him. It's kind of interesting, to see that. All right, we'll pick up in verse 14 of chapter 26 next week. Thanks for your attention.